In the dead of winter, 1851, a schoolteacher named Elizabeth Hartwell stumbled into a nightmare that history tried to erase. Deep beneath St. Catherine's Academy for Young Ladies, hidden behind a false wall and forgotten storage room, she found something horrifying. 24 tiny beds, each one bolted to the floor, each one with iron shackles attached to the headboards. And beside every single bed, a torn doll, a faded ribbon, a tiny wooden cross. And then she saw the writing on the wall. Literally, scribbled in what looked like the desperate scrawl of a child, were 5 chilling words. "We are still here." Elizabeth reported everything, and Massachusetts buried it. Her testimony was sealed, silenced, and erased from record. Hidden so deep, no one saw it again for 136 years. Until 1987. That year, during renovations of the old Academy's chapel, a mason jar was found behind the altar, containing Elizabeth's handwritten account. The moment it was unsealed, everything changed, because the truth it revealed about those 24 missing girls was darker than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't a ghost story. It was a secret that 3 women, pretending to be nuns, were willing to kill to protect. But before we unravel what happened inside St. Catherine's, you need to understand one thing. This story isn't just disturbing. It's real. It's been covered up for over a century. And if you're brave enough to face the truth, you'll see why some secrets are buried not to be forgotten, but to stop people from ever asking questions. Because what happened inside that school was not an accident. To truly understand this horror, we have to go back to 1834. Massachusetts was booming. The Industrial Revolution had transformed cities into giants of steel and smoke. But that growth came with a cost. Factory accidents, disease, and poverty left thousands of children orphaned, wandering the streets. And nowhere was the weight of this more deeply felt than in Salem. Yes, that Salem. Even though the witch trials were 140 years in the past, the town was still haunted by its legacy. Deeply religious, rigid, and obsessed with order. Congregationalist churches towered above the gray skies like judgment itself. And nestled in the shadows of those steeples stood St. Catherine's Academy for Young Ladies, right on Gallows Hill Road. Yes, Gallows Hill. The academy was imposing. A 3-story Gothic mansion that once belonged to a wealthy merchant. Tall, narrow windows, sharp gables. A building that looked respectable on the outside, but inside it hid rot. It hid evil. Their message was perfect. A Christian institution for orphan girls between the ages of 12 and 17. Their promise? A future, manners, education, placement into good Christian homes. The brochures were luxurious. The tone was holy. Parents who died from cholera or factory explosions believed they were sending their daughters to a place of safety. But they weren't. They were sending them into the hands of 3 women who had built an empire on silence. At the top stood Mother Superior Victoria Whitman. Tall, cold, terrifying. Her hair was steel gray, her voice smooth and cultured, Boston elite. She claimed to have studied at Mount Holyoke and served orphans in Ireland. She spoke a divine purpose, of serving the forgotten, but no one knew what she really believed. Then there was Sister Margaret Collins. Kind eyes, soft voice. She taught literature and music. Her Irish accent brought comfort to the grieving girls, like echoes of lost mothers. She was a warm light in a cold place, and that made her even more dangerous. Finally, Sister Agnes Murphy, the enforcer. She handled finances, adoptions, letters, and punishments. Her habits were spotless. Her rules unbreakable. Her smile? Rare and cold. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The people of Salem adored them. Finally, someone was doing something about the orphan crisis. Ministers praised their work. Churches collected donations. Newspapers ran glowing stories. But no one ever asked what happened inside those walls after dark. No one asked why the girls stopped writing letters home. And no one heard the silent screams from behind the false wall until it was far too late. Despite being Protestant, the people of Salem welcomed the academy with open arms. Theological differences didn't matter. These women, these so-called nuns, were solving a crisis the churches themselves had failed to fix. They were caring for the orphaned, the abandoned, the forgotten. At the dedication ceremony in September 1834, even the mayor of Salem showed up. He stood beside Mother Superior Whitman, singing her praises, calling her a saint of Christian charity. She smiled. The cameras weren't there, but if they were, they have captured the perfect illusion. Girls arrived from all across New England. Mary O'Brien, just 13, lost both parents in a factory fire. Sarah Thompson, 15, her entire family taken by consumption in a Boston tenement. And little Catherine Murphy, no relation to Sister Agnes, only 12 when her father was crushed by a train. Her mother, drowning in poverty, handed her over with trembling hands and a broken heart. Each girl was greeted with warm soup, a clean bed, and a promise that they'd be educated, groomed for respectable futures, teachers, governesses, proper Christian wives. And when they turned 18, they'd be placed with fine Christian families. That was the dream. But dreams could be engineered. The academy's routine was strict, but not unusual for its time. Rise before dawn, morning prayers, long days of reading, writing, math, and domestic training. Evenings ended with Bible study. They wore gray dresses, white aprons, modest hairstyles. They learned how to cook, sew, clean, and how to be obedient. To visitors, everything looked perfect. The dorms were spotless, the girls polite, the sisters glowing with holy dedication. Inspectors saw exactly what they were meant to see. But what they didn't see is where the nightmare began. No one was allowed on the third floor, ever. They were told it was just seasonal storage. No one questioned it. The basement workshop was locked during tours. They said the girls used it to practice advanced domestic skills. But every time someone came to visit, it was empty. And over time, people began to wonder. New girls kept arriving. But where were the old ones? Why did no girl ever return a visit? Why, in 17 years, had not a single letter been received from any girl who supposedly found home? Not one. Then came the first crack in the mask. And it came from someone completely unexpected. A young woman named Emma Prescott, a seamstress in Boston. February 1843. Nearly a decade since the academy opened. Emma was walking to work through the icy streets near the harbor when she heard something strange. A lullaby, but not just any lullaby, one she knew by heart. It was the same song her friend Mary O'Brien used to hum at the textile mill back in Lowell, before Mary's parents died in the fire, before she was sent to St. Catherine's. Emma froze. The voice was coming from a window above, a cracked, dirty window in one of the city's most infamous brothels. Through the curtains, barely parted, she saw her. A teenage girl in a silk dress, hair done in a style too extravagant for a child. Pale, still, but unmistakable. It was Mary O'Brien. Emma's heart stopped. 3 years had passed, but she would have recognized her anywhere. The cheekbones, the small scar by her brow. But Mary's eyes, they weren't the eyes of a child. They were hollow, distant, as if the soul inside had been traded for something else. Emma stood frozen. The lullaby still echoed from the window. Her mind raced, trying to convince herself it wasn't Mary. But it was. She stepped toward the door and was immediately stopped. A huge man appeared, blocking her path. With a voice that left no room for questions, he told her, "Respectable women don't belong here." Emma walked away, but not for long. That night, hands trembling, she wrote a letter to Street Catherine's Academy, addressed directly to Mary O'Brien. And inside that envelope, the first spark of fire that would one day expose a nightmare hiding behind holy walls. Emma waited. Days passed, then a week, and finally a letter arrived. But it wasn't the letter she expected. There was no cheerful update, no handwritten note from Mary, no assurance that everything was okay. Instead, Emma received a cold, meticulously worded letter signed by Sister Agnes Murphy, and it chilled her to the bone. Sister Agnes thanked her for her concern. She said Mary O'Brien had been placed with a devout Christian family in Western Massachusetts more than 2 years earlier. And then came the line that made Emma's stomach turn. The family has requested privacy and wishes to avoid further contact. Emma read it again. Mary didn't want to write back. Mary had asked for silence. That didn't sound like the sweet, bubbly girl she remembered. Something felt wrong. The letter was too clean, too final. It was clearly designed to end the conversation. But Emma noticed something strange, something only she would have caught. The handwriting. The main text was Sister Agnes's perfect script. But the signature at the bottom? It was different. Hasty. Sloppy. It was as if someone else had signed Sister Agnes's name in a rush. Emma might have let it go. She wanted to. But 3 months later, the past came screaming back. She was shopping at Faneuil Hall in Boston, weaving through vendors and crowds, when she froze. Ahead of her, a well-dressed man in his 50s was leading a young girl by the arm toward a black carriage. The girl looked maybe 14. Light brown hair, freckles across her nose. And Emma's heart stopped. It was Sarah Thompson, another girl from St. Catherine's Academy. Another girl who was supposed to be living a happy life with a loving Christian family. But this girl? She wasn't dressed like a daughter from a respectable home. Her clothes were luxurious, but inappropriate. Expensive silk, too revealing for a child. The kind of outfit Emma had seen only in the city's seedier districts near the harbor. And her face? Dead behind the eyes. The same lifeless stare Emma had seen in Mary. The look of someone who had given up. Emma tried to follow, her heart pounding. But the man, refined, authoritative, pulled the girl into the carriage and slammed the door shut before Emma could get close. As the carriage rolled away, the girl looked back, her face pressed against the glass. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that frozen second, Emma saw it. A silent scream, a desperate plea for help from a child too afraid to speak. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. And then she made a choice, one that would change everything. She wrote another letter to St. Catherine's Academy, this time more direct. She said she had seen Mary and Sarah in Boston. She demanded to know where they'd been placed. She asked if she could visit the academy, just to check on the other girls she used to know. This time, the response didn't come from Sister Agnes. It came from Mother Superior Victoria Whitman herself, and it was no longer polite. The letter was brief, eloquent, but laced with venom. Mother Whitman wrote that Emma's continued questioning was disturbing the peace of girls who had found happiness in their new lives. She warned Emma about the danger of mistaking strangers for old friends, suggested her imagination might be playing tricks on her, and then the final line, words that would burn into Emma's memory forever. Young women who persist in pursuing matters that do not concern them often find that their own safety and reputation may be called into question. I trust a sensible girl like yourself will understand the wisdom of allowing sleeping dogs to lie. Emma put the letter down, her hands shaking. That was no denial. That was a threat. And now, she knew the truth. Something horrifying was happening behind the holy walls of St. Catherine's. 2 girls were supposed to be living happily with families of faith. Instead, they were showing up in places no child should ever be, dressed like women, walking with strangers, eyes filled with unspeakable pain. And Emma had only scratched the surface. The question that haunted her was simple. How many more? How many girls had vanished into silence? How many were taken? Sold? Broken? And what could one ordinary seamstress do without putting herself in mortal danger? Emma's suspicions might have faded into history, just another tragic mystery, if not for what happened next. Because in the autumn of 1847, a storm began to build, and for the first time in 13 years, the perfect mask of St. Catherine's Academy started to crack. By 1847, Mother Superior Whitman had become something of a celebrity in the religious circles of Massachusetts. She was invited to speak at Congregationalist churches, where she gave moving sermons about Christian charity and the sacred duty to protect orphans. But behind the sermons was rot. Success had made the sisters careless. What had started as a small, quiet scheme, placing girls with questionable families, had become something massive, something dark, something horrifying. They were no longer just matching orphans with sponsors. They had become major suppliers in a human trafficking network that stretched from Boston to New York City, feeding girls to brothels and private collectors for the elite. And then they made a mistake, a fatal one. In October 1847, a man named Cornelius Blackwood arrived at the academy's gates. Wealthy, polished, generous. He claimed to be looking for a young companion for his sick, bedridden wife, someone gentle, sweet, obedient, someone who could offer care and companionship. He offered a massive donation, 5 times what a normal family gave. But the story was full of red flags. He said he lived in rural western Massachusetts, but everything about him, his shoes, his speech, his confidence, screamed city life. He gave vague answers about his wife, avoided specifics, and insisted on meeting the girls alone. Any real religious institution would have sent him away, but Mother Whitman didn't hesitate. She saw dollar signs. She arranged for him to meet 3 of her best girls, Catherine Murphy, Elizabeth Porter, and Hannah Clark. All young, all beautiful, all described in cold terms as well-behaved and desirable. Assets, not children. What she didn't know was that Cornelius Blackwood wasn't real. The man behind the name was Detective Inspector William Ashworth of the Boston Police Department, working undercover on a case that had haunted him for months. It started with a body. In the summer of 1847, a girl, no older than 18, was pulled from Boston Harbor. Dark hair, delicate features. She looked like someone who once had a future. But the most disturbing thing? A tattoo. Small, amateur, just a cross with the letters of C underneath. Ashworth had seen similar marks on girls found dead in brothel raids. But this one was different. Sloppier, like it had been done by hand. SC. St. Catherine's? It was a theory until he found more girls, more tattoos, and more missing persons reports. Always the same story. Orphan girls placed in respectable homes who simply vanished. They weren't runaways. They weren't on the streets. They were just gone, erased. No letters. No marriages. No deaths. Nothing. All roads pointed back to St. Catherine's Academy. That's when Ashworth launched a sting. He created a fake identity, posed as a wealthy buyer, and walked straight into the belly of the beast. And what he found inside was worse than he imagined. During their private meeting, Mother Superior Whitman didn't hesitate. She talked about the girls the way a merchant talks about inventory. Their ages, their obedience, their looks, their silence. She said clients with special tastes could be accommodated, and that discretion was guaranteed, as long as the money was right. Ashworth kept his face calm. Inside, he was shaking. Then he asked to meet the girls. And instead of taking him to the main dormitory, where clean beds and smiling faces waited for visitors, Whitman led him down a different hallway, one he had never seen. A wing of the academy hidden from the public, and what was waiting on the other side of that door would make Ashworth realize he wasn't walking into a school anymore. He was walking into a factory of broken souls. The moment Ashworth stepped into that hidden wing, the air changed. This wasn't a dormitory. It was a showroom. The rooms were smaller, but the decor? Luxury. Silk curtains, imported rugs, elegant furniture. Everything screamed wealth and predatory purpose. And then the girls walked in. 3 of them, dressed in tailored gowns, hair curled, lips painted. Not a threat of poverty on them. They weren't orphans. They were products. They smiled with practiced grace. Their eyes, though empty, Ashworth could see in their movements. They had been trained to entice, to submit, to perform for adult men who saw them as playthings. It was a parade of innocence lost. But just when Ashworth thought he'd seen all, something else caught his eye. As he turned to leave, he glanced through a dusty window in a far corridor Mother Whitman had carefully avoided. What he saw, a hidden workshop. Inside, girls worked in silence, sewing, scrubbing, sorting cloth. Their faces were hollow, their backs hunched. They weren't students. They were laborers, prisoners, and standing over them, Sister Agnes Murphy, watching like a hawk. Ashworth's blood went cold. This place was operating on multiple layers. A finishing school for girls being groomed for clients, a sweatshop exploiting others for endless labor, and a graveyard of vanished souls, girls who simply disappeared when they were no longer useful. This wasn't a school. It was a machine of cruelty. And now, Ashworth had one mission: bring it down. But how do you take on women worshipped as saints? For 13 years, Mother Whitman and her sisters had cultivated unshakable trust. Salem's churches adored them, officials protected them, and their entire operation was cloaked in God's name. Ashworth couldn't rely on his word alone. He needed witnesses. He needed proof. And then salvation came from a name he didn't expect. Emma Prescott, the seamstress who had dared to speak up. She finally walked into the Boston Police Department, trembling but determined. She told everything: what she saw, what she suspected, what she feared. Her voice became the first spark. But Ashworth still needed more. He needed someone from inside. Enter Dr. Nathaniel Webb, the Academy's physician. Respected, quiet, unquestioned, and deeply complicit. Ashworth uncovered years of payments. Huge sums, paid out regularly. But for what? Then he found it. Records. Detailed medical files going back to 1836. The first patient? A 14-year-old girl. Whitman had called it an accident. But the injuries? Clear signs of violent assault. Ashworth kept reading. More girls. More accidents. Broken bones. Infections. STDs. Abortions. This wasn't medicine. This was cover-up. And Webb, he had taken notes. Lots of them. Not just about the girls, but about the clients. The men. Names. Powerful names. Politicians. Judges. Priests. And then the one that made Ashworth stop cold. Mayor Robert Thornton. The same mayor who had stood at a podium praising St. Catherine's for its Christian values, had been paying for children behind the scenes. Also on the list, Judge Harrison Cromwell, a moral crusader in court, a predator in private. Reverend Samuel Blackstone, famed preacher, secret monster. This wasn't a school scandal anymore. It was a statewide conspiracy. Ashworth was no longer going after 3 corrupt nuns. He was about to confront an entire network of predators hiding behind pulpits, gavels, and polished shoes. And every single one of them had blood on their hands. This was it. Detective Ashworth had seen evil before, but nothing like what he was about to uncover beneath the academy. He went in under the pretense of a routine inspection. But what he found? Hell on earth. The basement of St. Catherine's Academy wasn't just storage or a workshop. It was a factory of exploitation. Small Blue Diamond Room 1. A sweatshop. Girls hunched over machines, sewing until their fingers bled, all to make money for the academy. Small Blue Diamond Room 2. A hidden clinic. Blood-stained instruments, jars of medicine, and the unmistakable smell of pain. This is where Dr. Webb did his treatments. Small Blue Diamond Room 3. The grooming chamber. Girls trained to smile, walk, speak, even breathe the way their future owners preferred. But then, Ashworth found room 4. Behind a false wall, carefully hidden. He forced it open and was immediately hit with the stench of burnt death. Inside was a makeshift crematorium, a crude furnace surrounded by fragments of bone, teeth, and half-melted iron restraints. These weren't forgotten relics. They were bodies. Girls, children, murdered, incinerated, and erased. Skull forensic tests later confirmed it. Over 40 girls, all between the ages of 12 and 18. Some had been beaten. Some had died of disease. Others, discarded for becoming inconvenient liabilities. But then came the final twist. Ashworth opened a small, hidden compartment near the furnace. Inside was a ledger, an ironclad, handwritten record of every crime committed in that basement. Heavy checkmark, names of clients. Heavy checkmark, amounts paid. Heavy checkmark, services rendered. Heavy checkmark, notes about the status of each girl. Most chilling of all, a list titled Retired Inventory. Each name crossed out, each girl dead. And at the bottom, for signatures, Mother Superior Victoria Whitman, Sister Margaret Collins, Sister Agnes Murphy, and a name Ashworth never expected to see, Father Patrick Ollie. Except Father Ollie didn't exist. He was a fraud, a fake priest planted to give the entire operation a holy disguise. This wasn't just a trafficking ring. It was a criminal empire backed by God, gold, and government. Ashworth had the truth. All of it. But the second he tried to bring it forward, everything changed. He was summoned by his superior, Captain Brennan, a man who had always had his back. But this time, he wouldn't even look Ashworth in the eye. "Detective," Brennan said slowly, "these are serious accusations you're making against very respected men." Ashworth's heart dropped. "Captain, I have bones, ledgers, medical records. This is mass murder." Brennan looked down at his desk, hands shaking. Evidence can be misinterpreted. That's when Ashworth knew. They were trying to bury it, just like they had buried the girls. Ashworth ever expected. One of the girls who had escaped. She appeared at the police station late one evening, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, trembling from cold and fear. Her name was Elizabeth Porter, one of the 3 girls Ashworth had seen during his undercover visit as Cornelius Blackwood. She was supposed to be gone, sold, or worse. But she wasn't. She had survived. And what she told Ashworth would change everything. Elizabeth's voice trembled as she described a nightmare she had lived through, not just for days, but for years. St. Catherine's wasn't a school. It was a grooming facility, a front for a network of trafficking, torture, and silent death. Elizabeth had been one of the favorites. That meant she was kept healthy, trained in etiquette, dressed like a doll, and paraded like livestock before rich clients. Her first placement was with a senator. She was 14. When she fought back, she was drugged. When she tried to escape, she was locked in a cellar for 2 weeks. No food, no light, just prayers piped in through a speaker. "Repent and obey," the voice of Sister Agnes said over and over again. Then came the branding, a scar below her ribs in shape of a cross with a slash through it, the mark of the disobedient. She said she only escaped because the senator's household maid, a woman named Amira, smuggled her out during a thunderstorm and dropped her at the gates of a church. From there, Elizabeth wandered, starved, and hid until she finally gathered the courage to come forward. Not to the courts, not to the church. To Ashworth, Elizabeth gave names, details, floor plans, codes. She confirmed the crematorium, the underground tunnel to the river, the ledger, and even the names of girls who had disappeared. And then she said something that made Ashworth stop breathing. There were more girls, not just the ones in the academy. "What do you mean?" Ashworth asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elizabeth's eyes welled up. They had other homes, detective, places hidden in the countryside, places with no names on the maps, places where the most dangerous clients went, the ones who wanted girls they could keep forever. Ashworth knew then this was far bigger than he ever imagined. This wasn't a school. It was a supply chain, a ring of orphanages, clinics, fake religious retreats, and secret properties across Massachusetts and into New York. And it had existed for decades. The 24 missing girls? Just a fraction. With Elizabeth's testimony, Ashworth finally had the last piece of the puzzle. But going public would be like lighting a fuse. He had one shot. He gathered every document, every photo, every journal entry, every medical record, and Elizabeth's first-hand account. Then, in the dead of night, he delivered it all in person to the Boston Sentinel, the only paper independent enough to publish without fear. And when the story broke, it shattered everything. Names, faces, dates, evidence. The story ignited a firestorm across New England. Mother Superior Whitman was arrested as she attempted to flee the country under a false name. Sister Margaret was found dead in her cell 3 days later. Suicide. Sister Agnes vanished and was never seen again. Judge Cromwell? Disbarred and tried. Reverend Blackstone? Excommunicated. Mayor Thornton? Resigned in disgrace. But justice wasn't complete, because many of the most powerful men escaped punishment, hiding behind money lawyers and burned evidence. And the girls, the few who survived, they would carry the scars forever. Ashworth kept his job, but barely. He was offered bribes, then threats, then early retirement. He declined all 3. He stayed, to make sure no other academy ever rose in the shadows again. And as for St. Catherine's Academy, it was burned to ground in an unexplained fire 3 weeks after the trial ended. No one mourned its loss, but the ghosts never left. Some say you can still hear voices in the ruins, singing lullabies, the same ones Mary O'Brien used to sing, the same ones that led Emma Prescott down the alley, that started it all. All right, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you is absolutely insane. This is a kind of story that sounds like something out of a thriller movie, but it's all true, and it's darker than anything you've ever heard. It all started on a cold November night in 1847. Detective Ashworth, a straight-up lawman with nerves of steel, opens his door to find Sister Margaret Collins standing there. But this wasn't the calm, holy nun everyone expected. No, her habit is ripped, soaked in blood, her face bruised, and her eyes wild with terror. She gasps out, "They're going to kill me, detective. They know I've been talking to you. Just like the others, I'm next." Ashworth doesn't hesitate. He pulls her inside, locks the doors, and listens. And what she spills next will blow your mind. Her real name isn't Margaret Collins. It's Martha Caldwell, and she's no nun. None of them are. They're criminals. Cold-blooded murderers. For 13 years, they've been running St. Catherine's Academy like a twisted, evil machine. Martha, Victoria Whitman, and Agnes Murphy weren't caretakers. They were con artists who had met in prison, serving time for fraud, theft, and even murder. Here's the crazy part. They killed the real nuns who were on their way from Ireland to start a genuine orphanage. They took their identities, stole their documents and money, and buried the nuns in a field outside Marblehead. Then, they disguised themselves as the nuns and took over the mission. The community welcomed them with open arms. Who'd suspect a thing? At first, they tried running a legit orphanage, but Victoria had agreed that was impossible to satisfy. One wealthy Boston merchant's perverse offer changed everything. She realized men would pay big to get access to orphan girls with no one to protect them. So Victoria started selling those girls off. And because she was Mother Superior, no one questioned where the girls went. Everyone believed the lies. But that was just the beginning. What started as a few shady deals quickly morphed into a massive trafficking operation, a dark network that spanned cities, feeding the greed and depravity of the elite. Martha's voice trembled as she told Ashworth this terrifying truth, exposing the nightmare hiding beneath St. Catherine's holy facade. And that, my friends, is just the beginning of one of the darkest scandals in New England history. All right, here's where it gets absolutely chilling. And trust me, you'll want to pay close attention. This wasn't just a shady orphanage anymore. No. St. Catherine's Academy had become a sophisticated, brutal network that supplied children to brothels all across New England. Martha, the nun who just broke down in Ashworth's living room, told him exactly what went down in the basement workshop. You think they were teaching the girls to sew or cook? Think again. This was where they broke the girls, where they taught them to obey, to accept that their bodies were no longer their own. Girls who resisted, beaten until they couldn't fight back. Girls who tried to run, publicly tortured to scare the rest into submission. It was a terrifying, systematic machine of abuse, psychological and physical torture designed to crush any spark of resistance. And if a girl was special, beautiful, or refined, she got extra training tailored to the most twisted, wealthy clients. Victoria Whitman had a secret client list, a nightmare Rolodex of men with sick demands. Some wanted girls who looked like their own daughters. Others wanted girls who reminded them of dead wives. There were men who paid extra for girls who would cry, and men who paid extra for girls who wouldn't. Here's the darkest twist. When a girl got pregnant, caught diseases, or simply got too old, it was game over. Dr. Webb's medical treatments were just desperate attempts to keep these girls sellable. When that failed, the girls were eliminated. Victoria called it retirement, a grotesque euphemism for murder. Agnes took the girls down to the basement, and they never came back. Martha could smell the smoke from the crematorium, see the ashes scattered in the garden. Over 60 girls have been retired in 13 years. Some murdered outright. Some died from abuse. Others killed for threatening to blow the whistle. Those 24 missing girls everyone was looking for? Martha's voice cracked as she said, "They're not missing. They're dead. Every single one." Victoria even kept a record of their names, proud of the fortune she'd made off their suffering. But wait, it gets bigger. This wasn't just one evil academy. Victoria had built a network spanning New England and beyond, Connecticut, Rhode Island, even Philadelphia. They traded girls, shared clients, and helped each other erase problems. Dozens of operations like St. Catherine's were out there, running the same nightmare. Martha came forward because she was scared for her own life. Victoria and Agnes planned to make her disappear too. She'd heard them plotting her accident. She was done being part of the nightmare. She broke down crying, saying, "I never wanted it to go this far. I thought we were just stealing money. I never imagined we'd become murderers. I can't live with this anymore." And then came the bombshell. Martha offered to spill everything, where the real nuns were buried, locations of all the other dark operations, names and records of clients and transactions, and most importantly, where Victoria kept her most damning evidence, a safe in her private quarters filled with financial records, client lists, and even photographs clients paid extra to have. All right, buckle up, because the real showdown is here, and it's about to blow your mind. So, Martha Caldwell, the ex-nun who spilled the guts of this nightmare, she wasn't just confessing to some local scandal. No, Ashworth realized this was the biggest criminal conspiracy Massachusetts had ever seen. But exposing it, that was like poking a sleeping bear, with claws sharp enough to rip him apart. These powerful men, the clients of St. Catherine's, were ready to do absolutely anything to keep their sins secret, and they had the money and influence to make threats vanish. Permanently. Ashworth knew he had hours, maybe less, before Victoria Whitman and Agnes Murphy realized Martha had turned on them. So he pulled a power move, a raid at dawn on November 16th, 1847. Forget the local cops. Ashworth cut the corrupt ties and called in state police and federal marshals. No way was this going down quietly. What they found inside, worse than Ashworth's worst nightmares. Victoria's safe was a gold mine, literally. Records of 127 girls trafficked through the academy in 13 years. 68 murdered once they were retired, including the infamous 24 whose names shook the nation. The client list? This wasn't just local sleaze. We're talking 3 federal judges, 12 state legislators, 5 mayors, scores of businessmen and religious leaders, even a member of Congress and a federal cabinet member. Victoria got busted trying to flee to Canada, suitcase loaded with gold coins and jewelry paid by those clients. Agnes, caught red-handed destroying evidence in the crematorium basement, and the fake Father Ali vanished without a trace. The trials? Explosive. Victoria played innocent but was convicted of 68 murders, sentenced to death. Agnes claimed coercion but was proven a brutal accomplice, sentenced to death too. Martha got a life sentence for cooperating, spending her days teaching literacy behind bars. Dr. Webb spilled the darkest secrets from the medical side, convicted accessory to murder, but died within 2 years in prison. But here's the kicker. Most of the powerful clients, they escaped justice. Some fled the country. Others shredded evidence. Many denied it all. Judge Harrison Cromwell, found dead in his study right before testifying, suicide or silenced. Rumors swirled. Only 12 out of over 50 clients went down. The rest? Wealth, power, and silence saved them. The academy itself? Burned to the ground by an angry mob before authorities could intervene. Emma Prescott, the brave whistleblower, became a hero, then a target of threats. She fled west and lived under an assumed name until 1891. The fallout changed everything. Laws cracked down on orphanages and charities. Inspections became mandatory. Staff had to be verified. The world wouldn't turn a blind eye anymore. And most importantly, the 24 girls? Finally, their names were remembered. Mary O'Brien, Sarah Thompson, Catherine Murphy, and 21 others, all stolen lives now carved in stone at a memorial in Salem's Green Lawn Cemetery. Detective Ashworth, promoted, became Boston's police chief, and spent his life fighting the same darkness. He never married, haunted by guilt for not stopping it sooner. He died in 1889. The site? Now a peaceful park where kids play. But locals say sometimes, on quiet nights, you can still hear faint lullabies, the spirits of those girls finally at rest. This story still haunts Massachusetts. The files? The most requested in the state archives. People keep searching, trying to uncover what else might be hidden. How many other St. Catharines existed? How many predators got away? How many children's stories were lost forever? The truth is brutal. The greatest evil was human. Not ghosts, not monsters, but people trusted to protect, who chose power over protection, silence over justice. These 24 girls? They found peace because people like Emma and Ashworth refused to let them be forgotten. So what do you think? Was this the full story? Or are there darker secrets buried with Victoria Whitman? Drop your thoughts below. If you want more mind-blowing dark mysteries, hit subscribe, ring that bell, and share this with a friend who loves a chilling true story. Remember, sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones with ghosts, but the ones with real people behind the horror. See you in the next video.